All right, let's get started on disassembling and reassembling. First, we'll look at the right way to move it around, and then how to make a preliminary inspection to determine if it's worth repairing. If it's not, we'll see how it should be packed for shipment. If it can be repaired, we'll look at tearing it down, inspecting the individual parts, putting it back together, and we'll look at selectively fitting pistons to liners. If you need to store it, we'll talk about that too. Last, we'll even qualify the rod bearings for reuse or rejection. Before we start, here's a list of tools you'll be needing. It's lifted with a power assembly lifting tool. You can use a shipping case or some wood blocks to stand it up. You need a 3/4 inch drive socket wrench and extension, or an air wrench. Cylinder head lift tool, piston pulling eye bolt, a snap ring tool, a compression ring expander, a carrier holding fixture or a vise with copper jaws. You'll also need a bore gauge, thread lubricant, silicone grease, and some protectant like Tectile or Cosmoline. You may have already pulled your power assembly, so you might know that it has to be handled a certain way. The lift tool has 2 holes. Using one, it lifts straight up, and the other holds it at the right angle for entry to or removal from the engine. Care should be taken not to damage that rod while you're moving it or when you set it down to work on it. Okay, time for inspection and disassembly. All your power assemblies should be taken apart so that you can find out how much damage there is, even if the whole pack is going to be returned. That's so you'll know what damages are there, and you won't get stuck with overcharges when it's sent in for unit exchange. To tear down the assembly, you can start by standing it in its case. Then remove all the holding tools and hoist. The next step is to remove the 8 head-to-liner nuts and washers with an impact wrench or a 3/4 inch drive ratchet. Of course, you'll reuse them later if they're in good shape. Apply the head lifting fixture and screw the 2 long bolts, 6 or 7 full turns, to secure the fixture to the head. Tightening the 2 lock nuts evenly will separate the head from the liner. Apply the hoist and remove it from the liner. Put it on a clean surface and take off the lift tool. Now you can use a knife or something to remove the gasket from the liner. You have to keep it level as you bring it up and off. If you don't take it off, then the piston rings will get caught on it as the piston and rod come out. Put the lifting eye into the piston with about 4 or 5 turns. Hoist it up to remove it and the rod. Lay them carefully on a clean surface. You don't want to scratch anything. Take off the hoist and lifting eye. If you don't have a shipping case that's empty and you have to lay your power assembly down to disassemble it, then there are a few tricks you should know. Get a wood block like the piston holding block and prop up the end of the liner. Before the head comes off, pull the piston and rod down until the bottom of the piston is even with the bottom of the liner. This makes it easy to get the snap ring off. Then you can remove the rod, carrier assembly, and thrust washer. Reach inside the piston and pull it out. The elevated liner helps you to keep from scratching the piston skirt. Be careful during that last inch of pulling the piston. You don't want it to fall out. Support it with one hand so that you can catch it when it comes out. Now, pull out the support block. Okay, break loose the head-to-liner stud nuts. Just barely, though, because now we'll put that block under the top end of the liner. All right, now, take off the nuts and washers. The rest of the disassembly is just like we described earlier. Now we've got 3 units separated. Let's begin an inspection. We'll start with the piston and carrier assembly. If you're tearing down your pack using a shipping case, you still need to get the piston and carrier apart. Get your snap ring tool and insert the ends into the 2 holes on the snap ring. Compress the ring with the tool and take it out. Now pull on the rod and carrier. It should come right out. You may need to jiggle it a little. Check the thrust washer. It may still be stuck inside the piston. Now stick the carrier and rod assembly into the carrier holding fixture. After you remove the bolts, the rod will lift off. If you don't have a holding fixture, use a vise with copper-protected jaws to hold the rod while you remove the bolts. When the rod is off, the piston pin will slip right out. Take a look at the insert bearing. There should not be any deep scratches, but there may be some particles stuck in the grooves. Whittle a wood stick and clean them out. If it's good, then leave the bearing in. If it's bad, replace it and the wrist pin. If the pin is damaged, then put a new bearing in with your new pin. You have to keep the bearing and pin mated, just like the basket halves should be mated with the fork rod. Let's go over to the piston. Put it top side up and get your ring expander. Take the rings off, top one first. When the 4 rings are removed, you can carefully turn the piston over and remove the 2 oil scraper rings. If you come across a ring that's stuck, get a screwdriver and insert it behind the ring at the gap end and pry outward. If that doesn't work, carefully use 2 screwdrivers to try and move or loosen the ring. At this point, if you think your piston needs any repairs, you should stop and watch the program on repairs to the piston and rod assembly. The first step is to remove the valves from the head. The head should still be on a clean work surface of wood or cardboard to prevent scratching the firing face. It doesn't matter whether you use a single or multiple spring compressor. We're using a multiple compressor here. It simply screws into 2 threaded holes designed for the tool. Once it's screwed in, bring the handles down to a horizontal position. This will allow you to get to the valve locks so that the springs can be removed. Once the locks are removed, release the spring compressor and remove the tool. The springs and the retainers will come right off, and the valves will slide out. That's the work on the head, so if you need to repair it, check the videotape program that shows all the steps in repairing the head, because the exhaust valve seats must be reground before putting in new or reconditioned valves, just as the liner must be honed before reuse. Let's check the liner. Look in the water inlet hole. The deflector should be in good shape. If not, another one will have to be installed. You should get the liner bore gauge and check its dimensions at 90-degree angles, at 2 inches, 6 inches, and 12 inches deep into the liner. This is to tell you if the liner can be used again after being honed. So let's look at the liner and piston together, because you need to make sure that their specs are good, or if selective fitting might be needed. You can mix pistons and liners in order to get within the tolerance allowed for piston-to-liner clearance. This is explained again in the liner repair section of this series. This selective fitting of pistons and liners is done only when the liner bore size exceeds 9 68/1000 inches at 6 inches from the top of the liner after the liner has been honed. You can use a liner that measures 9 68/1000 inches to 9 73/1000 inches at that 6-inch location, but only if you find a piston that will leave no more than 22 thousandths piston to liner clearance. Say you had a 9 73/1000 inch liner. You'd have to have a piston with 9 51/1000 inches skirt diameter. Review the liner repair program for honing and cleaning procedures. The type of rings are critical too. Cast iron liners have certain kinds of rings. Chrome liners have different rings for the piston. You'll know what kind of rings to use by looking in the parts catalog under your engine model number and then choosing the rings for a cast iron or chrome liner, whichever you need. While we're talking about rings, there's one more thing you need to get: the ring groove gauge to measure the top ring groove wear step. Keep trying until you find the one that just fits all the way into the groove. Then measure again to find the one that goes in about 3/4 of the way. The difference is the amount of wear and is called the wear step. Standard width rings are used in the lower 3 grooves. If the wear step is more than 3/1000ths of an inch, it'll have to be removed. If the whole groove is more than 201/1000ths of an inch, the top groove must be recut to 1/64 or 1/32 over size. This will probably have to be done in a shop. All right, let's look at where we are. We've decided whether or not our parts are good enough to reuse. And we've honed the liner and cleaned the parts real well. We should be able to begin reassembly. As we go, we'll oil every part to help protect it and act as a pre-lubrication. We'll start with the carrier and work our way up. If a new piston pin is going to be used, put in a new bearing. If you use an old one, the same pin and bearing must be used, and the bearing should be in the same relative position to the pin as it was when it came out of the engine. Don't use a bad bearing. The bearing slot should be wiped clean with an oily rag. And the bearing slid into place. Center it and check the tangs so that when we bend them, everything will be centered. Okay, strike the center of the tang with an indenter tool or screwdriver. Make sure it's snug as you go to the other side and do the same. It should not move at all. Now coat the whole thing with fresh, clean engine oil. Get your pin, oil it, and slide it in so that the small index hole on the end of the pin is on the same side of the carrier as the piston cooling inlet hole. Make sure it rotates. And then you can get the rod. Find the serial number on the rod and put it so that it too is facing the same side as the oil cooling hole on the carrier. Put some ThreadTex 2303 on the bolt threads and install the bolts. Go ahead and tighten them down. Get the bolts down to about 10 foot-pounds and check the spacers. If they move, you'll have to pull that bolt and find out what's wrong. If the spacers don't turn, torque the bolts to 450 foot-pounds. Now get the piston and install the rings. This is well explained in the program that deals with repairs to the piston, carrier, and rod. You'll put the bottom rings in place first, then the top rings. Always check for any rings marked top on the side and put the word top toward the crown. The number 4 piston ring is a tapered face ferrix-filled ring. Ring 2 and 3 are chrome-faced and can be in either the number 2 or number 3 groove. The top or number 1 ring is also chrome-faced and has chrome on the sides, but it is several thousandths thicker than the other compression rings. It'll have top groove only stamped on it. When all the rings are on, the gaps must be staggered. The program on piston repairs will also tell you how to do this if you have any questions. If you have a chrome liner, the top 3 rings are going to be different, so make sure you've got the right set of rings for the liner you're working on. When that's done, turn the piston over very gently and make sure the inside is clean. Apply some new oil on the thrust washer platform and then put the thrust washer in place. Get the rod and carrier and put it into the piston. When it's seated, it should rotate freely. Get your snap ring and snap ring tool and install it into the piston like this. Now, with the feeler gauge, check the clearance between the ring and the carrier. It should not exceed 25 thousandths of an inch. So much for the piston and carrier. Let's check the liner. Is it good and clean? Is the water inlet deflector in place? If so, put the liner in the power assembly shipping case. That way you can stick the rod and carrier in from the top and get it down far enough to allow the head to be put on. If you don't have a shipping case, you could stand the liner up on blocks so that the rod goes down between the blocks just enough to have the piston crown go below the head-to-liner gasket surface. All right, get your ring compressor sleeve and clean it out. Put it on the liner and oil it down. Oil the upper part of the liner bore, too, so that the piston rings will slide in okay. Now, with the lifting eye in place, raise the piston and rod assembly with a hoist. Oil the whole piston surface. Check the ring gaps for proper positioning. The rod's serial number needs to be on the same side of the liner as the water inlet opening. Carefully lower it into the liner. You might have to jiggle it a little bit so it'll slide on down. When you get the piston crown, even with the gasket surface, you should go on far enough down so that the rod is hitting bottom to allow you to remove the hoist. Be sure and take off the lifting eye too. Clean off the gasket surface. You don't want any dirt or oil anywhere along there. The gasket will have EMD Top 645 written on it. This should face upward. Be sure that the notched hole is over the pilot stud. The pilot stud has this little flange on it. Now install the head-to-liner water seals and the heat insulators into the counterbores, and be sure they're not cocked in the hole. Now you're ready for the head. You might need to put in some valves. If you do put some in, use only new or reconditioned valves. Repairs to the head, like the installation of valves, are covered in the videotape that you may have already seen. It's an easy process. Drop one in each of the exhaust ports. We'll need to check the vertical distance from the fire face. Check with a feeler gauge to see what the distance is between the flat of the valve and the straight edge. It shouldn't be any greater than 93 thousandths of an inch. If it is, and it's a reconditioned valve, replace it with a new valve to try to get the required dimension. If it's still greater than 93 thousandths of an inch, the valve seat has been ground too deeply into the head, and the head will have to be rejected. If all 4 valves pass this test, carefully turn the head right side up. Be careful not to slide it around. You might scratch the fire face. Now install the valve springs and valve spring retainers and put the spring compressor in place. Now compress the springs and install the valve keepers. Make sure that they're in good condition before you put them in. Then you can pull the valve spring compressor off. All right, with the valves now in place, you'll need to check the stem height. This tool can do it, and it's called a valve checking tram. Again, Section 2 of the manual and the program on head repairs will explain this if you have any questions. The clearance must not be more than 1/16 of an inch. If it is, replace the high or longer valve. Don't grind the valve tip, because these are hardened surfaces, and grinding could make them crack. Remember, 1/16 of an inch is the maximum clearance. With that done, flip the head over and rest it gently on the rocker arm studs with the firing face toward you. You should have a valve seat seal tester. If it's old, you can test it on a piece of glass. It should stick for at least 2 minutes. To test the valves, clean off the face real well and put a light film of oil on the tester cup. Stick it on over one of the valve seats. It should stay for at least 2 minutes without losing suction. Just pull the release trigger to get it off. If the suction tester falls off in less than 2 minutes, the seat will have to be reground so you can get a better seal. You should be ready to put the head on the liner now. Make sure the fire face is clean. Now, lower it over the liner. The test valve hole should be directly over the water inlet hole. That way you'll also have the pilot stud in the correct stud hole. Recheck the water seals to be sure they're not cocked. If it stops before it's all the way down, it's because of the head lifting tool. Simply loosen the nuts until it goes down. When that's done, remove the lifting fixture and put on the hardened washers and lubricate the stud threads with Texaco Thread Tex 2303. Now the nuts. Snug them down. After they're snug, follow the proper torque sequence and torque them all to 75 foot-pounds. Then, torque them all to 240 foot-pounds. You'll probably need someone to help hold the power assembly while you torque. Okay, the nuts are torqued, so let's put on the water discharge elbow. Both the head and elbow surface should be good and clean. A red O-ring will be used between the elbow and the head. 2 brown O-rings go on the other end and should be well lubricated with Dow No. 4 silicone grease. Put the elbow onto the head with the 2 Allen head bolts. Torque them to 30 foot-pounds. If you're going to store it, if you're going to install it, don't lift it until you get the piston held in place. If you're going to store it, use the holding bolt and block. If you're going to install it into the engine, use the piston lifting tool. Either way, you should not lift it until your block or lift tool is secure and locked in place. Lift it on up and install the lower liner seals if you're going to install it into the engine. With that done, put on the rod position clamp and you're ready to put her in the engine except for one thing. Check your connecting rod bearings. If they're used bearings, they can only be used on the same crank pin journal. Used bearings may have some minor dirt scratches, and that's okay. If the scratches look severe, or if there are signs of discoloration, use a new bearing. This area on the upper bearing shell where the blade rod rests is a pure lead flash overlay. Some of this area may show wear. That's okay. But like we said, if the wear looks bad, get a new one. Okay, you've got a power assembly all ready to go. You can store it or put it in your EMD and expect many hours of trouble-free service. So what do you do if you've got a part that's no good? Ship it. Same goes for anything that you're just not sure about because of not having the proper equipment to measure or check it with. Just about everything that you reject should be returned for credit. Liners that are scuffed or worn beyond dimensional limits. Pistons that need to be regrooved. Heads that are scratched or nicked in the sealing areas. Or rods that are questionable. Give the parts that you return or store a good coating of protectant like oil, Tectol, Cosmoline, or something like that. Put it on thick. That salt air gets to metal real fast, and unfortunately, we have to pay for all the damage.
This rod is an example of unnecessary cost to the user of an engine. We feel that the parts that come back in on unit exchange should be as well taken care of as the parts going out. This rod has a smooth surface in most of the areas, but somewhere between the time it was taken out of the engine and the time it got into the shop, it was either rained on or salt water on it, and the blade of this blade rod is rusty.
If you have the original container to ship your parts in, that would be the best. If not, make up containers that are the appropriate size. If several parts are going in the same case, partition the case so that each part has its own compartment, because you know how careless some of these shippers can be. If you're going to store any parts, make sure they're clean, well coated with oil, and tagged with all the data, like bore diameter and skirt dimension. Pack them up, too. It'll save on cleanup when it comes time to use them. More importantly, it'll protect them from damage. One of the few times you'd be packing up the entire assembly is if you had a bent rod. Even a slightly bent rod could have caused enough stress to give you problems like this later. Packing it up is easy. You've probably unpacked a couple from their containers already. Well, just reverse the process. First thing, take off the water discharge elbow. You'll need to use an Allen wrench on it. The rod positioning clamp also needs to come off, and while you've got it on the hoist, after having removed it, oil the inside of the liner bore. Get the rod, too. Tectile would be even better if you have some. Now, lower it into the shipping container. Get it all the way down in there and check to be sure it's settled in. Take off the lifting fixture and piston holding tool. Put some oil or Tectile into the injector well to protect it. Now you can put the piston holding bolt and the block in place. Put on the wood block over the rocker arm studs and apply the bolts that attach to the back of the case. Then the rocker arm bolts need to be put on. If it happens to be a fork rod assembly, oil the basket halves and fasten them to the container. Then all that's left is to put on the cover and fasten it. That's the whole process for tearing down and reassembling your power pack.